All right. So thank you both so much for joining us for our October virtual program on the Global Organist. I am Jillian Gardner, the counselor for Young Organists, and also joined by fellow board member Jordan Prescott. Jordan, would you like to say anything about yourself?
I'm My name is Jordan Prescott. I've been on the national board for AGOYO for 2 years, and before that, I was the district chair for the Mid-Atlantic region for AGOYO.
Great. So the first thing I wanted to ask was just to ask both of you to introduce yourselves and talk a bit about your background, like where you grew up, where you went to school, where you have worked, and anything else you would like to share with us. Whoever would like to start.
Ben? Sure. My name is Benjamin Sheen. I'm currently the sub-organist here at Christ Church Cathedral in Oxford in the United Kingdom. I have been here since January, and for me it's very much coming home because I was organ scholar here as well, alongside my degree from Oxford, here between 2008 and 2011. I grew up in the cathedral scene. I was a boy chorister at St Paul's Cathedral in London. I went off to Eton as a music scholar, and then, as I mentioned, I came to Oxford. In 2011, I started my master's degree at Juilliard in New York with Paul Jacobs. And while I was studying my second year, I took up a position of assistant organist at St. Thomas Church on Fifth Avenue in New York. And I have been there until I came here in January. So that's a little bit about me so far.
Yeah, and I'm Jonathan Vaughn. I grew up in Croydon in South London, and I was educated at a local grammar school, which is state selective. And I did organ scholarships at Croydon Parish Church, at St George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, and St John's College, Cambridge. Then I spent about 13 years working in 2 cathedrals in the UK, and I've been in the US for about 3.5 years. I did a short stint at the Cathedral of All Saints in Albany, New York, and now I'm working at Christ Church, Greenwich, Connecticut.
Great. Okay, so the first topic that we wanted to talk about was some of the differences in schools and church jobs in the United States versus those abroad. Would you say like one prepares you better for certain aspects of your career or not for other aspects? And what holes were there that you needed to fill in like once you got out of school?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, sure.
I think one thing I've been reflecting on a lot about, you talk about which prepared you better. I would say that I've benefited hugely from having both, being studying here in the UK and growing up as a cathedral chorister. So I was very much immersed in the world of church music, and while I was at Eton, I was called upon to accompany the chapel choir there. And then, of course, as organ scholar here at Oxford, you are essentially one of the assistant organists, and you're very much in a professional setting with a professional choir of men and boys at the time. Now we also have girls as well. And so it prepares you very much for a life as a liturgical organist. But what I wanted to do when I came to America was I'd studied with some wonderful teachers here in the UK, David Sanger and Thomas Trotter, David Good. And I had built up a wonderful kind of traditional view of the organ and playing, playing methods and ideas. And I really wanted to go and study with someone completely different. And I was recommended to look at the Juilliard and, of course, the formidable organist that Paul Jacobs is, and wonderful teacher. And it was fascinating, actually, spending 2 years as a master's student, where essentially I was thrown into a world where the rule book is thrown out the window. And there's a greater focus on what you as a musician want to do with the music and how you interpret it and how you approach it in a concert setting and what you're trying to say in a performance and how you bring people to organ music and, perhaps to music they don't know at all. And I think it's been fascinating that having both sides of that, I don't think there is one that is, there's no one thing that's better than the other. But I really enjoyed a completely different look. And of course, in America, there's really, it was the idea of a concert organist as well is very much alive and kicking. And I think I was very glad to have the opportunities to travel all over the States and just sort of meet a whole wealth of new people and playing styles that I'd never perhaps considered before, much less constricted and much more free and open to interpretation. So I thought it was I think I'm very lucky to have had both.
And I think, and unlike Ben, of course, I never studied in the United States. I did consider it a bit in the mid noughties, but it never actually came about. But since, but I cut my teeth very much at Croydon Parish Church where I started when I was about 13. So around the age that cathedral choristers stopped being choristers was really when I started playing, and I had opportunities there that you would never have thought that you would get at that age. And I certainly think back to what I was being presented with. While I was 14, I'd already played things like the Britain Jubilate and the L'Anglais Mass and things, and all sorts of howls. I look back and it's kind of crazy that this was something that happened to me. But of course, that really set me up. And then when I went to St George's, Windsor, and then on St John's, I had that skill set of playing for church, and all of the skills, so setting things up quickly, that I was actually able to go forward and do. I mean, one thing that I did when I was at school, and I don't know when you did these, Ben, but I did the 2 diplomas of the Royal College of Organists, and of course that provides you with a huge set of musical skills. The playing is important, but really what gives you the opportunity to progress your sort of musical lexicon is things like the score reading and the transposition and the sight reading. And so that, sort of aiming to do those quite early alongside the experience that I had with lots of regular service playing was what really set me up and got me going. I kind of, I ended up in the States. Most accidents, it wasn't really, but I had the opportunity to work at the Cathedral of All Saints, and because I'm blessed to have an American father, I was able to just get on a plane and come and work. And that was very much a kind of sabbatical time for me, which was about 6 months, and then I came over to Christchurch.
Can I just add to it's very interesting what Johnny was saying with the diplomas, what's called ARCO and FRCO here in England. What I found very surprising, the thing I found most shocking in America was, I've spoken to a lot of teachers about this, that there is a real there's a real focus on the concerts, the concert playing side of things. So I was several institutions either don't have any kind of service playing element, or they're very much on the side or even optional. And what's amazing now being back here, now that I'm back in a university setting, so I work very much with university level students and our 2 organ scholars here at Christchurch, and we are asking them to transpose at least weekly, improvise, harmonize, all sorts of things like that. And that's one thing that really seems to be absent in the sort of US, certainly higher level education. And I think it's interesting that I think it's so important that those skills, without those skills, I'm sure John would agree that we wouldn't be where we are. And the fact that it's, if you start that young, it becomes something you just, get used to doing, and you get the practice of it. And I think it's very interesting how the kind of schools of organ playing and liturgical organ playing, it's quite separate in the States. It's to the church organist and the concert organist. Whereas I think here, there's so much more focus on the liturgical skills, playing skills, keyboard skills, and that kind of thing. And that was quite interesting, and I'm glad that that I had a solid basis from here on which to rely.
Say that I think Jordan and I can both agree, having gone to school only here, that we really don't have those church skills unless we choose to actively work on them ourselves. It's only like 1 or 2 classes, and you just barely touch on everything.
It's very hard. Okay.
Well, and I was going to sort of ask, and you sort of alluded to it, but in your curriculum at university, are those keyboard skills emphasized in the curriculum? I mean, from my understanding, it's not nearly as much of a repertoire-based curriculum as it is a skill-based curriculum, all the way from the choir school through university. Whereas, as Jillian was saying, here, if we have those skills, it's because we learn them ourselves, and there's no school that you can currently go to study what you would need to know to pass the FAGO, which is our American equivalent of the FRCO. And I'm curious if you were able to get the skills to pass the FRCO through your school, or was it something you had to do independently, and how did that work?
I mean, I think that I certainly made a decision to learn those skills when I was a teenager. And maybe the motivation for that was perhaps because I wanted to get the diplomas. But I think that, but it was certainly examined in Cambridge. I don't know about Oxford, but I don't think if you go to the music colleges, whether those things are taught. I'm actually not sure about that. Do you know, Ben?
I don't know. I mean, I never. Yeah, we're both. With Oxford and Cambridge, it's all music students have to do a certain. They don't have to do transposition, but there's certainly score reading. I think score reading elements, and I think there's certainly sort of keyboard skills at a basic level, whether it's sight reading or figured bass or things like that. I think it's as Johnny said with.
I think there's definitely figured bass. Yeah.
Yeah, with the school, I mean, I think that the skills for FAGOs, or was it here FRCO? I get confused now. I think it's something you're not the level that's not taught in the classroom as such. I certainly didn't learn it alongside all my colleagues, but it's something that essentially I was sat down when I started high school at 13, and if I wanted to go, do these exams, it was a case of little bit every day. Those kind of skills you can't just sort of wake up one morning and do it, or you can't practice it in the same way like repertoire. It's just something that you accumulate by doing it and getting you train your brain to do it. It's certainly not, it's not in the curriculum, but I think it's more, these exams are more, I mean, many young organists, it's sort of considered the route to go through these skills, and they put you in good stead for jobs.
Yeah, I think that they're also really good skills just for building up how good you are at reading, and of course, the better that you read music, the quicker that you can prepare things and quickly learn rep and things like that. So I think that all of those skills are cumulative. They're not just things that you learn in isolation. They're things that they build up your general musical skill set.
I think they've also been made, they are changing the skills that are required in those diplomas. I think they're being made a little more relevant. I remember when I struggled immensely with, it brings you down a cold sweat, and I'm sure Johnny will understand this, the kind of 5 staves and 5 clefs or something Palestrina, and I remember just when it came to the exam, I just sort of went for it. And you can practice till you're blue in the face, but you have 30 seconds to sit down and look at this thing with tenor clefs and alto and baritone and all. So I think now it's more kind of 6-part vocal scoring, which I think is more, it shouldn't be something that's just a kind of, a trick that you can do. I think it's, I think they have to kind of update these things sometimes that, it's more kind of relevant to day-to-day life.
Yeah, I think Ben's right. But what I would add is that if you can sort of get those skills, even if you don't get them all the way to perfection, if you can read in clefs, it makes reading an organ score, much, much easier. So,
All right. Do you guys have any advice for Americans who want to pursue any work abroad, whether that be church work, organ scholar positions, or any concertizing?
We had two American organ scholars when I worked at Wells Cathedral, both of whom are names people will know. We had Stephen Buzard and Brian Anderson, and they were both very successful. And I think both learned a huge amount from being thrown into the system in Wells, because suddenly you're going from maybe doing one or two services on Sunday to doing you know, eight, nine. I think we were doing 9 services a week. So, which we split between us both in terms of conducting, but it's different way of work. You've got that level of work to when you've got, a much more relaxed musical workload. So, I think that it's a hugely beneficial experience, and I think they would both say that. Ben, you worked with Stephen at St Thomas. Would that be what he said about it?
Yeah, I think it was, talking to Stephen about it. I mean, it was unlike anything he's, just like I had when I went to the States. It was unlike, the kind of rigor and to a certain extent relentlessness of a week. There are in the, I think, Wells is what, 7 or 8 services a week, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
9, I think.
Yeah, you're talking about, and so it's a skills, not just playing your prelude and your postlude and accompanying it, but also finding the time in cathedral diaries to practice and preparing all this music on an almost daily basis, and that's where the skill set that you can fall back on, that with limited preparation time you can sit down and play these services. And it's not about, it's a completely different mindset, I think. And I think it's just it's a fantastic opportunity to focus on different skills and build up this skill set. And it's something that I remember when I was organ scholar, I was told that even if a piece was unaccompanied, so some Magnificat or anthem that was 4 parts, had no organ part, probably Bird or Tallis or something, I was encouraged to go and play through it, just for the sake of getting those skills together, and taking choir rehearsals and all these kind of things. You're suddenly, you're just immersed in it, in a completely different world. And I think that can only be a good thing. I think it's just, I haven't heard anyone who's hated their time in the UK, I don't think, as an organist.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's very different about what you'll get out of that experience is you'll be more mentored through it rather than taught through it. So you might and Ben does this at the moment still, you might have sessions on particular things, particularly to start when you set up, but it's not a process of necessarily saying it must be that you must do this, this is how you organize your time. It's more a, how do you plan it, how do you get things set up, how do you work towards what you're doing.
It's also, there's a sense here that of course you're aiding the skills of not only playing skills, but just you're aiding worship, and you are the spur of the moment, spontaneous, if you have to improvise, or you're it's sort of very much in the moment. And it's something that I think that you can't practice for all the time, specifically like Johnny said. It's not like if you practice improvisation for an hour, it will go right. It's a kind of spur of the moment thing, and being able to be cool and controlled in that environment, which is something that a lot of people have not experienced before in this kind of way.
Yeah, and I think the types of improvisation you are likely to need to do are not the types of improvisation you'll likely be taught at conservatoire. So you're likely to get to do hymn extensions, processionals, those types of things, rather than, I don't know, sets of themes and variations, which is very much a concert thing. So
yeah, was our improvisation classes just structured. You have to create this form today, and it was just not very practical as far as what you could use in real
I
life.
think what I've done with organ scholars, I mean, I haven't been here very long, but what I've tried to do so far and will do this year is not necessarily, it's the kind of building up your musical language of certain styles. So say the introit of Evensong is bird. You would improvise while you might not perfect a bird fantasia just off the top of your head. You get a sense of what chords work, what progressions, and more importantly, what isn't bird. And I think that kind of stylistic improvisation in terms of that's directly related to what's happening in the service, as Johnny said, not a theme of variation for the last 18 minutes. You're talking about 2 minutes to get between a piece of Matthias and a piece of Palestrina, and they're in a tritone apart, and and that's something that you just it still brings me out a cold sweat, but you get used to those kind of and that's not something you can kind of I don't know, it's difficult to, you just have to do it. We can encourage, I encourage the organ scholars to give it a go, and if it doesn't go very well first time, then we work out why and figure it out that way. But that's very, it's certainly interesting with 18, 19-year-olds as well.
And then what about like visas and traveling and being able to get paid while working in the UK? I think most of us can't just, take a year or two off to be there. But I think, reading pages and pages about visas on the internet is pretty daunting to people too. So do you have any quick tips of that?
I don't know about doing recital work. I mean, I can talk to the experience that we had with doing the organ scholars, and it was quite a lot of justification that you needed to provide for why you were able to employ these people and why there wasn't somebody better, or you weren't able to find somebody better that was British. But it's not as bad as going the other way. So it's easier to go to the UK than for a Brit to go to America, I think. Is that right, Ben?
Well, surely can't be any harder. Having been through the 2.5 O1 visa process, where my document book of evidence and all that was nearly 600 pages long.
Wow.
And I think over here, I mean, having looked at various, we had an American countertenor last year, Tim Parsons from New York, who was wonderful. But I think he had there's a lot of paperwork. I think it's often, the US does one thing, the UK does the same thing. I think as long as you're backed by an institution, I mean, obviously here is Oxford University, you're in a better state. I think there's now, with everything going on, I think visas are going to be, they're tricky things. And as Johnny said, you need to have a kind of either an idea of, what you might do in terms of concert itineraries or engagements that you already have booked or something like that. Or these kind of, I think it's not so bad to get a year-long visa, as far as I can understand, that if you're not intending to move here permanently in the first instance, then you have more chance of essentially, especially for younger people with essentially, you can extend studying or it's not the same kind of work visa, I don't think so. But I must say, I've not had a great deal of experience with it, but it must be easier than going to the US.
All right, well, that was what was on my list. Jordan, do you have any other questions?
No questions, just to say thank you both for participating and for being willing to talk. It's been really informative, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great to speak to you both.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would just say if there's any members of the AGO that wanted to approach me directly, I'm sure Ben would be the same. I'm happy to go into more detail with people. People can contact me through my website if they want to.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I think with we're about to hear next year's organ scholars later in this month. Yeah, absolutely, as Johnny said, if there's any questions, any issues, any things that people don't agree with or particularly agree with, then I'm sure I'm very happy to speak to anyone who wants to.
Okay, well, I'm sure our members will appreciate that. So thank you both so much for your time.
Very welcome.
And
Thank you.
Thanks
Yeah.
so much. Be well, everyone.
All
bye,
right.
guys.
Bye.